Okay, guys. So, I'm not going to be there at all this week. I am homesick with COVID. So, I'm going to be making these videos this week, working from home. I'm going to be at my computer all day. So, if you ever have any questions when you're working on the homework, please feel free to email me. I'll get back to you as soon as I possibly can. Today, after this video, you'll have time to work on your homework, and at least I think you will. And while you're working on your homework, like I said, please email me. So if you can go ahead and write this down in your study journal. If we need to pause the video, let's pause the video. After today, I can graph a linear equation by finding x and y intercepts. So we're going to go ahead and get started with that. Alright, so I also apologize now. I'm using my laptop here to write, and I have to use my finger because I do not have a stylus. So I'm going to try and keep it as neat as I possibly can. So if you guys could go ahead and draw an x and y coordinate plane, or draw a graph like I have here in your notes, that'd be awesome. And then I want us to recall, what do we call the point when our line crosses the y-axis? And we talked about this last week. We call that our y-intercept. So last week we talked about the equation y equals mx plus b. Oh my word. Okay, and b is where it crosses our y-axis. Okay, now if we remember, if we look at this equation right here, we see that our y-intercept, where it crosses the y-axis, is actually at -2. And if we want, we could figure that out without looking at the graph as well, because we could, if we say, okay, when my line crosses the y-axis, my x is going to be 0, and my y is, in this case, -2. So if I didn't know that it crosses at -2, I could say, okay, well, if I plug 0 in for x and solve for y, I can find where it crosses the y-axis. So if I did that here, if I plug 0 in for x, 2/3 times 0 is just 0, so I'd have y is equal to -2. So that's one way to find my y-intercept. Okay, so if I have my y-intercept here at -2, and I look at my equation and I say, okay, what's my slope? In this case, it's 2/3. Okay, well, like last week we talked about our slope being kind of our movement from our y-intercept. That means my change in y is 2, so I go up 2, and to the right 3. It means my y-intercept, or my next point is right there, and I can draw my line. Well, in this case, if I look at it, where that next point is also a point where it crosses an axis, and that's where it crosses the x-axis. Okay, so what we're going to learn about today is how we can find that x-axis, because in this case we were lucky and it just so happened to be right there, and I can just look at this and say, okay, well, it crosses the x-axis when x is equal to 3. Okay, and so my x-intercept is, so when y is equal to 0, x is equal to 3. Okay. Okay, but now, what if I don't have a graph? Okay, I want to see if I can figure out what my x and y intercepts are without using a graph. So on the last example, when we first started, we know what y equals mx plus b, and b is our y-intercept. And then we said, okay, we could also figure out what b is if we put 0 in for x, because when our line crosses the y-axis, x is equal to 0. So I want to use that same logic here. So right here with this first one, I know my y-intercept is going to be at 3. Because if I plug 0 in for y, or 0 in for x, then my y is equal to 3. Okay, I want to use that same logic to find my x-intercept. To do that, I'm going to plug 0 in for y and solve for x. And we've been practicing solving multi-step equations, so we're ready for this. So if I plug 0 in for y, I get 0 is equal to negative x plus 3. Okay? Now I want to solve for x. I want to get it by itself. So in order to do that, I want to move this positive 3 to the other side. And 3 is being added, so the opposite of addition is subtraction. So I'm going to subtract 3 from both sides. When that happens, I get negative 3 is equal to negative x. Okay? And now if we remember, in front of x, we don't ever write it, but there's always a 1 right here. So in front of x, I've got negative 1x, and I got negative 1 on the right being multiplied by x. And I got negative 3 on the left of the equal sign. So I want to get the x by itself, and it's being multiplied by negative 1. The opposite of multiplication is division, and I want to divide negative 1 by a number so that it's equal to 1. And I know that number is going to be negative 1, because negative 1 divided by negative 1 is just 1. So I end up with x on the right, and on the left I end up with 3, because negative 3 divided by negative 1 is 3. So that means my x-intercept is when x is equal to 3, y is equal to 0. Okay, and then remember our y-intercept, we can find that by using it, since it's in slope-intercept form, I know it's my b, which is just 3, so my y-intercept, it keeps doing this, hang on. So my y-intercept is when x is equal to 0, y is equal to 3. Or my y-intercept. Okay. Now I want to try this other one. Okay? So just by looking at it, I can tell what my x-intercept is going to be. And it's going to be a negative 2. My x-intercept, my y-intercept, sorry. So y-intercept is when x is equal to 0, y is equal to negative 2. Okay, now I want to figure out what my x-intercept is going to be. So I'm going to figure that out by plugging 0 in for x. So I've got 0 is equal to 1/2 x minus 2. Now remember, 1/2 x is the same thing as x all over 2. So what I'm going to do is I want to get the x by itself. So I've got this, I got this minus 2 on the right side, and I want to move that to the left. And it's being subtracted. It's the opposite of subtraction is addition. So I'm going to add 2 to both sides. So it gives me 2 is equal to x to being divided by 2. Now I want to get x all by itself, and it's being divided by 2, and the opposite of division is multiplication. So I'm going to multiply both sides by 2, because if I multiply both sides by 2, these cancel out. So on the right, I'm left with x, and on the left, I'm left with 4. So that means that when y is equal to 0, x is equal to 4. So that is my x-intercept. Okay, it's x-intercept. Hang on. There we go. Okay. So now I want to know is what if the linear equation is written in standard form? We've been looking at slope-intercept form for almost everything we've done so far. So standard form, when we, last week, we looked at an example where we had, we were selling cell phones. We were selling iPhones for a certain amount of money. We were selling Samsungs for a certain amount of money. And in one of the questions, we asked how many would we have to sell to make, I think it was $1,800. So when we had that written out in standard form, let's use A to represent the cost of, or how much we're selling iPhones for. And we didn't know how many we were selling. So to represent a number that we're not sure what it actually is yet in math, we use a variable, and we use the variable x. And then that was added to, let's use B to represent how much we were selling Samsung phones for. And then that was being multiplied by y, because y is the number of those phones we're going to be selling. We're not sure how many they're going to be yet. And then we'll set that equal to, and we'll just use C. In that example we used last week, it was $1,800, okay? So this is a linear equation written in standard form. So what we're going to be doing is looking at linear equations in standard form and graphing them by using their x and y intercepts. Because if we know where it crosses the x-axis and the y-axis, then we can draw the line. Okay? Okay, so now we're going to look at how we can find the x and y intercepts. So this first one right here, to find the x-intercept, that's where it crosses the x-axis. So if you're looking at a graph, and you want to look at the point where it crosses the x-axis, and the same thing for the y-intercept. If you're looking at a graph, look at the point where it crosses the y-axis. Okay, now to find it without a graph, if you just have an equation like we have here, to find the y-intercept, you plug 0 in for x. Okay? If you plug 0 in for x and solve for y, you'll figure out what the y-axis is, or the y-intercept is. So let's do that for this example here. So I've got 6, and I'm multiplying that by 0. Add that to 8y and set it equal to 24. Okay, so I know 6 times 0 is equal to 0. So all I have next is 8y, and that's equal to 24. Okay, now I want to solve for y. So 8 is being multiplied by y, and I want to undo that. So the opposite of multiplication is division. So I want to divide 8 by 8, because 8 divided by 8 is 1. So those reduce to 1, so I'm left with y is equal to 24 divided by 8 being 3. So that means my y-intercept, so when x is equal to 0, y is equal to 3. Okay, now I want to find the x-intercept. So I'm going to use the same logic. But instead of plugging 0 in for x, I'm going to plug 0 in for y. Okay, so if I plug 0 in for y, that means I'm going to have 6x plus 8 times 0. We're going to set that equal to 24. I know 8 times 0 is just 0, so I'm left with 6x, and that's equal to 24. Okay, now I want to get the x by itself. So to get the x by itself, it's being multiplied by 6. I'm going to do division, because it's the opposite of multiplication. So I'm going to divide both sides by 6. When that happens, I get x is equal to 4. So that means that my x-intercept, so when x is equal to 4, y is equal to 0. Oh, that x goes up here. So that's how I find my x-intercept. So to find your y-intercept, you plug 0 in for x and solve for y. To find your y-intercept, or to find your x-intercept, you plug 0 in for y and solve for x. So let's do one more. Let's do this guy right here. So I want to find my x-intercept, so where it crosses the x-axis. So in order to do that, I plug 0 in for y. So that means I got 0. Oh, wait, let's not do this one. This one's not in standard form. Let's do this one. It's in standard form. Okay, so I want to find my x-intercept. So I want to plug 0 in for y. So that means when 30 is equal to x, 30 times x, and I got 6 times, remember 0, or y is equal to 0, and that's equal to 240. Okay? So I know 6 times 0 is equal to 0, so I've got 30x, and I set that equal to 240. My goodness. Okay, now I want to solve for x. I want to get x all by itself. X is being multiplied by 30. The opposite of multiplication is division. So I'm going to divide both sides by 30. And that happens, I get 1 here, so I got x. And then if you want to take your calculators, you can do 240. And you can divide that by 30. And that gives you 8. So that means my x-intercept, so when y is equal to, so when y is equal to 0, it means x is equal to 8. So that means that our line crosses the x-axis at 8. Okay, now let's find the y-intercept. To do that, we plug 0 in for x. So I've got 30 times 0, and I'm adding that to 6y, 6 times y equals 240. Holy cow. Okay, so 30 times 0 is equal to 0. So I've got 6 times y, and that's equal to 240. Okay, so I'm going to get y by itself. So I'm going to divide both sides by 6. Holy cow. That's a 6. Okay, so that means I have y is equal to, and then 240 divided by 6 should be, hang on, I think it's 40, hang on. Yep, 40 is equal to 40. So that means my y-intercept, so when x is equal to 0, y is equal to 40. Okay, and then I can go and I can plot that on a graph if I wanted, and I could connect my two dots. So on the x-axis, or on the y-axis, I would put a dot at when y is equal to 40. Okay, so one last example, some last examples here. If we've written in standard form, and we want to find the x and y intercepts and then graph it. So I'm going to find my x-intercept by plugging 0 in for y and solving for x. So if I plug 0 in for y, 6 times 0 is just 0. It's equal to 18. Okay. And then I plug 0 in there. So that's just 0. So I've got 2x, and that's equal to 18. So if I want to get x by itself, I divide both sides by 2. Holy cow. Holy cow. Divide both sides by 2. If I do that, that's equal to 1. So I got x, and then 18 divided by 2 is 9. So that means when y is equal to 0, so when y is equal to 0, x is equal to 9. So that means I can come over here to 9. It's not letting me. Right there. So at 9, I know it's kind of hard to see, but that's at 9. That dot, that's where the line passes the x-intercept. Okay, so to find the y-intercept, I do the opposite, or I do use similar thinking, and I plug 0 in for x and solve for y. So I got 2 times 0. Holy cow. I'm adding that to 6y, and that's equal to 18. Okay, 2 times 0 is just 0. So I've got 6 times y, and that's equal to 18. I want to get the y by itself, so I'm going to divide both sides by 6. When I do that, those cancel out, and I've got y is equal to 18 divided by 6, which is 3. So that means when x is equal to 0, y is equal to 3. Okay? So that means I go to the left and to the right 0, so I'm on the y-axis, and I come up to 3. I'm on. Yeah, kind of right there. There we go. And then I connect my lines, my dots. Okay, I know it's not very good, but so yeah, that's how we graph an linear equation by finding the x and y intercepts. So, like I said, I'm going to be on my computer all day. There's a Delta Math assignment that covers the stuff I just showed you. I want you guys to work on it, and if you have questions, please email me, and I will do my best to help you from home. Alright, thanks. Wash your hands. Don't get sick.